What's it like to do international competition? That's what I'm going to cover in this video.
Welcome to Advanced Construction Videos, where we show you how to tackle rocketry, building techniques, and more. On our website, we sell kits, motors, building supplies, and electronics. So come and learn, shop, build, and fly when you visit us at apogeerockets.com.
Keepers ready. 5, 4, 3, 2, start.
Oh, I think she's separated.
There you go.
She's separated. Something's coming down.
Hi, I'm Tim Van Milligan from Apogee Components. So a couple weeks ago, we were in Serbia for the World Space Modeling Championships. And a lot of people knew that we were going, and I've been asked many times, how'd the trip go? What did you learn? What is it like to fly on the US space modeling team? So that's what I'm going to cover today. Now, this is going to be a lot of videos and home movies and pictures. I took well over 3,000 photos, but I'm not going to show it to you all. I just want to give you a little bit of the flavor of what it's going to be like when you are part of the US space modeling team. Yes, that's right. I want you to be on the future teams. Every 2 years, the World Space Modeling Championships happen, and next year will be the qualification year. So you'll get your rockets ready now, and in the summertime at NARAM, you'll fly your rockets to compete on the US team. And then the following year, in this case it will be 2027, you'll go overseas, and I think it's going to be in Poland the next time. And you would fly there with the US team. And so what is it going to be like, and what are you going to learn? So I'm going to go here to my computer and kind of go through some photographs and kind of like give you a little bit like what it was like for us as we went over. When you go overseas, obviously it's a big expense, and you're going to want to visit other countries as well. So we also went on vacation, and so it started out, our whole family, my wife and my 2 daughters went. Now, as the trip went along, my daughter started peeling off. My oldest daughter, Allison, she's in PA school right now, so she had to get back after the first vacation, and she didn't go with us to Serbia. And then Ashley went with us to Serbia. So Ashley was actually the competitor on the team. I was along as a supporter. And so she competed, and then she peeled off after her events were over because she also needed to get back to school. So Ashley is in engineering school at the University of North Texas. She's a junior this year, and school had already started. You know, basically as soon as we left the United States, school was starting here, so she missed almost a week and a half of school. So she had to get back as quickly as she could. And then at the end of the trip, which you'll see in my photos, is where my wife and we spent a few days in London and the surrounding area. So our trip started with a vacation in Serbia, and Serbia is a lot like not Serbia, Switzerland. I'm looking at the picture, and this is not Serbia. Switzerland is a lot like Colorado. It's very mountainous, and it has some flat spots too. We spent our time in Interlaken, which is the land between the 2 lakes. And it's a very tourist destination, and it was very crowded, but it was very beautiful. The difference between Switzerland and Colorado is they get a lot more rain in Switzerland than we get here in Colorado. So it's very green. But we didn't get any rain while we were in Switzerland. It was beautiful weather for us. So this is Interlaken. This is our arrival. We started in Zurich, and this is the arrival at the airport in Zurich. This is the mountains. I think Mount Eiger is on the left, And I'm not sure what that mountain is on the right, but it was, you know, we did a lot of hiking in Switzerland, and the hikes were just like gorgeous. So that was kind of like our hike. Also in Switzerland, my daughters wanted to do a Via Ferrata. Now, I'm not sure what the translation is, but it's a scary hike in the mountains where you are strapped onto a cable because you could fall off. And this is one area of the mountain where you could fall off. And down here at the bottom, it was probably a good 1,000 to 1,500 feet straight down. And so this is a platform overlooking the valley where we were hiking. And the platform is used for base jumpers, you know, that want to jump off the mountain. The big trip for me in Switzerland, I told my daughters one of the things that I wanted to do was to go to airplane museums. So we visited the Flieger Flab Museum, which is outside of Zurich. And it's interesting because Switzerland, their military is so much different from ours in the United States. They're a neutral country, so they are strictly for defense. They fly American and British and French airplanes. In their museum, they have F-5s because they're no longer flying them. But one of the things about the museum is I am drawn towards the missiles because, you know, we're into rocketry here. And so whenever I see one of the missiles, I like to take some photos of it. You never know what might come out in the future if we want to do a scale missile. So I want to have some reference photos. And so here I've just taken some photos of missiles. This is a Hound Dog missile. This looks like some kind of Sidewinder, American made. Again, the Hound Dog, or Bloodhound missile. Going through the missile, the Bloodhound missile. It was also a cutaway, so you could see what was on the inside of this missile, which was kind of neat to do. This was a cutaway of a fin. You can see this is a ramjet right here. You can actually see inside of that. And again, more missiles. This one had a protective covering on it. I also like to take pictures of what the decals look like. So, you know, it's like, what might be in this missile? This is a Rapier missile that they used. After we had left Switzerland, we arrived in Serbia, and this was at the hotel that the U.S. team met at. So we were on our own up until this point, and then we congregated with the rest of the U.S. team. And you can see here we're in the lobby waiting for the bus, and all of our luggage was sitting there in the lobby just collecting, you know, making a fire hazard of everything. In the background was the cafeteria. The food at this hotel was really good. We had breakfast there. One of the Americans, his luggage got damaged, and so he had to find an alternate way to get his rockets onto the bus. So he found a Rubbermaid tote, and he just put tape across it. So here is, we got the bus. You know, we traveled as a team. So at this point, we're with the team all together, and this is one of the two buses that we had. The bus was a fairly modern bus, but they didn't have air conditioning inside, and it was hot. One of the things that I noticed about Serbia is that everything just kind of looks like it's falling apart. And this was the outside of the hotel. As we were standing at waiting for the bus, I took a picture of the hotel, and you can see that the cladding was starting to curl up on the corners. And this is typical of everything, all the buildings in Serbia. It was just not a well-kept country. You know, we arrived in Zrenjanin, which is the host city. This is one of the first, you know, scenes that we saw was just buildings of this sort. It's just like plaster falling off the walls. This was the city hall. This one was one of the better kept buildings, and if you look in the kind of top left corner, the roof, you see some brand new tiles that have been put on the roof. It's a little bit better maintained. But the reason I took this photo is if you look at it, the flag on the far left, this is the Serbian flag, and the flag right next to it is the Russian flag. So Serbia and Russia are kind of like an alliance. And that kind of, you know, being American over in Serbia was kind of tense. You know, we didn't broadcast that we were Americans until we were on the bus and going to the launch field. So this was the city square. So this is right in front of the city hall, looking in the other direction. The building in the background, that dark brown and grayish building, that was our hotel that we stayed in. And we pretty much took up the whole hotel, where it was well over over 90 people, almost 100 people that traveled with the U.S. team. So we took up, you know, a majority of the rooms in the motel. And it was, you know, walking along the main street, you know, so there was a plaza outside the hotel, and then walking down the road, again, you see a lot of derelict buildings, and some of them are in such bad condition that they should be condemned and torn down. They're just too much of a hazard for people. But there, you see a lot of them there. It was just, you know, pretty well run down country. This is actually a new building that was going up, and their construction methods just kind of interested me, so that's why I took this photo. It's just kind of like, you know, how do they build anything that's straight? I don't know. Again, another building ready to be torn down. The buildings that are the most well kept are the churches, and so, you know, when you go anywhere in Europe, there's going to be a lot of old churches, and my wife likes to go into the old churches just to see, you know, what's, you know, the artwork inside, and these are well kept. And to me personally, looking, all the old churches kind of like feel the same and look the same on the inside. The outside, they look a little bit different. This is inside the hotel. The other thing you notice about European hotels is the elevators are very small. They're like 2-people elevators, and we had all the luggage to go up and down every day. And so basically, I think I rode the elevator in the hotel once in the entire time that we were there. It was just, there was just too much of a line, and it was just easier just to go up to the 4th floor where we stayed. The other thing about the city is that the water is not safe for drinking. It had high levels of arsenic in it. And so in the bathroom, it had this big sign that says, "Water is not for drinking. Don't drink it." So everywhere we went, we drank out of water bottles. So this is the first day of the competition. I think it was actually the practice day. And we're all outside waiting for the bus, and you can see all of our stuff is ready to go onto the bus and out to the field. This was on the field, so this is the first day, and we didn't know where we were supposed to be, so we're just kind of congregating outside of our tent. For practice day, you bring all your rockets out there. This is the first time that you get to see the European motors. So here in the United States, we use, you know, the small Estes motors, but in Europe, we're using either motors made in Bulgaria or Serbia or Ukrainian. This is Kevin Johnson, and he had a beautiful glider model. So that's why I was taking a photo of it. It was all carbon fiber, just molded carbon fiber. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. And I think it was actually made in Ukraine. But it was a kit, so he had to put it together. This was on the field, just kind of looking around. This is kind of like the common area where everybody would have lunch together, and you can mingle with people from other countries. This was the U.S. tent. We had 2 tents that were back to back. The people standing out in front were their notable because they're all film crew. So the other thing we went over to Serbia for was to film the documentary called Skyward, and this will be coming out either late this year in 2025 or maybe early 2026, and it's actually going to be in the theaters as a documentary. So basically you have to go to like a film festival to see it, and as soon as we get information on when this documentary is going to be shown in the various places, we'll let you know. But the people on the right were the US crew, and then the person on the left was actually from Serbia, and he was doing a different documentary, but being all in the film industry, they all kind of congregated together and they were sharing film with each other. So the Americans were taking the film on the ground, and the Serbian was taking drone footage. So you get it kind of like an overall perspective. And I have not seen that footage yet, so I'm looking forward to that. This is kind of like a view from our tent looking out to the launch range. You can see it's a beautiful flat field. There's no hills that we had to contend with, and it was mostly just grazing land for sheep and goats and donkeys. But far off in the distance, there were some cornfields and sunflower fields, and soybeans were also out there. And there was thickets, and lots of thickets, and the people that had to do recovery had to contend with that. And I was on recovery for a day, and it was, yeah, you know, parachute recovery was in the thickets. And yeah, it was not. The advantage that the Americans have is we have such a huge team that the recovery system was really well run. You know, we all had walkie-talkies, and there was cars and drones, and now everybody is about drones. And so people are out flying drones looking for rockets in the fields. The cool thing is one of the countries is actually, once you find the rocket out there, you got to get the rocket back to the launch area. And one country was actually, they had this carrier case made out of foam that they would put the rocket inside, and then the drone would take it like 2 miles back to the launch site. And I thought that was clever. So on the field, they had a big truck, and you can't read it if you don't know Cyrillic, but it says water for drinking. So there was plenty of water on the field. But we actually got water bottles from the supermarket because we didn't trust that. When you're on recovery, you sometimes find rockets from other countries. And this one we actually found, and I actually brought it home because I am so interested in the technology of other countries and comparing them to the rockets that I make myself. And there's things that I like about it and that I learned from this rocket. One of them is the fins. They're made out of foam and then laminated with carbon fiber. I use balsa wood for my inside, and then I laminate on the outside with carbon fiber, and then I give it a nice reflective coating. But I do like the foam, and the reason you might want to use foam is just the consistency of it. Because balsa wood actually adds structural integrity to it, my fins are stronger. One of the things that I noticed is they don't use, this one didn't have fillets on it, so they were just surface mount. And they are a little bit more flexible than the rockets that I make. Mine are rigid, and they have fillets on them. The material, this is carbon fiber, and if I look closely, this is actually called spread tow. So it's ribbons of long strands of carbon fiber that are spread super thin. And I make my own spread tow. Because I couldn't find a supplier that could make the quality that I want. But they obviously found somebody to make that good, high quality spread tow. And so it looks really nice. Personally, I like mine because I know how it's made, and ours survived without any problems. I've seen some of these laying on the field, and they'll have some Kapton tape on them to cover up any pinholes where air was leaking out. But overall, the quality of this is immaculate. So on the field, they served us sack lunches, and the food was, in general, most of it you would recognize, and it was okay. This was actually a competition day. I can tell it's a competition day because Ashley was wearing her team uniform, and her first event was streamer duration. And, you know, when you're out there flying, this is kind of like what you'll see. All the people in the fluorescent vests are the timers. So the what you do in international competition is you don't time your own rockets. They have specific timers that are assigned to your country, and they rotate. So every round of competition, they rotate. So, but you get 2 of them, and they're assigned to you. So whenever you're ready, they're ready to launch their rockets. So you can see how the countries are separated by the ribbons. And there was a lot of countries there, and there was a lot of people around. But they're all Rocketeers, so you know, you're talking the same language. As you can see, Ashley was bending over here, and the cameraman from the Skyward documentary, she was filmed on every launch. But they stayed out in the background, so they didn't interrupt her at all. So here she's setting up the piston launcher for a rocket. So piston launchers, and I'll show you those in a little bit, they're going to, in the future, they're not going to be used. They're going to be outlawed. The rules are going to prohibit piston launchers in the future. So you don't have to worry about that. So it's just worry about, you know, just building your rocket and flying it. While I took a lot of photos, I didn't get very many photos of the rocket actually leaving the pad. And this is one of those photos of a rocket taking off. This one is not Ashley's. And I can tell because it does not have the purple fins. Here she's prepping. This is kind of like the prep area. They don't provide the tables. The USA team actually went down to a local store and found these plastic tables, and they actually wrote on them USA. Here she's put the nose cone on her streamer rocket. And again, you can you know, just see the background of the beautiful field that we had. This was the streamer team for the seniors. This was at the hotel, kind of giving you the flavor of what the event is like if you go there. The breakfasts, in my opinion, were the best meal of the day because it was a buffet and you could choose what you wanted to eat. This was the Slovakian team. They were practicing gliders for glider day. In the background, you can see a whole bunch of sheep running around near the contest range. The sheep never came onto the contest range, but they were pretty close, so you could see them. This is a altitude model. This was from Kevin Cusick, and there's a couple things to note on here. One is that he is 3D printing the transitions, and the upper stage is all 3D printed. The other interesting thing to note is that his streamer is tucked on tucked into the tube. He made a little compartment so that it's out of the slipstream of the air. And I want you to remember that little thing and how his streamer is nestled in there, because this is a problem that we've been dealing with, is what do you do with the streamer on your booster stage? Because if the rocket doesn't have a recovery device, it's going to be disqualified. And there's now a minimum size that the streamer has to be. It's kind of like 1 inch wide and 25 inches long is the smallest streamer that you're allowed to use. The other thing that I noticed is that competitors are using a lot of 3D printed components. So here is a ejection plug, or kind of like a bulkhead, that was also 3D printed. And you can see there's holes that are cut in the outside to lighten it up. One of the unique things in this photo is the altimeters. So they were using new altimeters at this event to track how high these rockets go. Now these are transmitting altimeters. So these are kind of like the world's smallest transmitting altimeters that will measure altitude. And they worked really good. The problem is that you can only launch one rocket at a time because they can only track one altimeter at a time. Those little altimeters have to fit inside of these tiny little sustainers. Again, I took this photo because that centering ring on the back end was 3D printed. This is an S1 model. S1 is altitude model. This was Steve Crystal just getting it ready to go into the launch tower. These are the European motors. The US team got a hold of a whole bunch of motors from overseas, and Chris Flanagan, he was testing them in a thrust stand so we could get accurate thrust curves of them. So the next time we go over there, we have a good thrust curve so you can run your RockSim simulations and know how your rocket's going to perform. This is that Polish model that I was talking about to compare against Kevin Cusick's. It was a beautiful model. One of the things that I really liked was that the streamer was actually tucked into the boat tail, but it was tucked in from the outside. It just fell out the side. And so this dark part here was a flap that would kind of fall off when the rocket came apart. It was hinged by just a couple of pieces of string. And then there's a string here that kind of goes off down to the left corner. That would actually, when it was folded forward, that string would go all the way up to the nose of the rocket. And it would, when the two parts were joined together, it would go inside of there or possibly as a burn thread. So when the ejection charge went off of the motor, it would burn that thread and then release this flap, fall out, and then the streamer would fall out. And I thought, well, that's a really cool idea. It's lightweight, it's aerodynamic, and it's almost bulletproof. I mean, if the string is burned, it's coming apart, that's coming out. But not all rockets were successful. This one, I'm not sure what country this was, but obviously they had something go wrong and the rocket came down and crashed and pretty much destroyed it. This is a picture of all the altimeters. All those altimeters needed little batteries, so this was their battery charging station. And somewhere in the background is the receiving station that they use to track all these little transmitting altimeters. Again, this is another image of the launch field and the sheep that were running through it. And in the distance, you could see there's a little town. So your typical town. This picture right here kind of intrigued me because this is parachute duration. And you can see that there's 3 parachutes in the air at one time. And one of them is different. One of them has a giant spill hole in the middle. And the reason for this is you have to get one of your rockets back. You have to make 3 flights, but you're only allowed 2 rockets. And so in order to make a 3rd flight, one of your rockets has to come back. And I don't know who was flying this rocket, but one of their strategies to make sure that they got it back was to cut a giant spill hole in it so it would descend faster. Unfortunately, it didn't descend fast enough. I think all 3 of these parachutes thermaled away. On this particular field, the thermals were really strong. In fact, on streamer duration day, they were so common, everybody was getting a max. A max is a 3-minute flight. After 3 minutes, they turn off their stopwatch and says, it's in the air too long, we're going to stop. And so when you have everybody maxing, there's a fly-off round. And there was fly-off rounds for a lot of events because the thermals were so good. So in this particular field, everybody, no matter what the quality of the rocket was like, quality didn't matter so much because the thermals were so strong. What mattered was consistency. Could you do it every single time? And I think, and if you wanted to know how we did, we weren't as consistent as we had hoped. Ashley DQ'd in both of our events because the nose cone separated from the rocket. So she had some good flights, but when you DQ one of the flights in a round, pretty much kicks you out of medal contention. So she was not going to be on the medal stand, but she had some good flights. At this point, we're about halfway into the competition. And at night, the Skywood documentary crew would interview Ashley and I. Here she's out in the middle of the courtyard outside of the hotel getting interviewed. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of flavor of what goes on during the documentary, because it's going to be really great when it comes out. So keep your ears available for that and tell your friends about it too.
Yesterday, and then I'll compete in one more tomorrow.
Okay, what's been your favorite moment of the trip so far? And you could answer like my favorite moment.
This was again the eating area and the eating situation. So we eat as a group. You can see there's lots of food that was available. In fact, the U.S. team, we actually went down to the supermarket in that little town and, stocked up on sweets and treats. But one of the common foods that you eat in Europe is cucumbers, just raw cucumbers that are sliced up. They don't put any salad dressing on them or anything, so you might want to bring some salad dressing with you. This was some kind of pasta dish with meat. Again, you'll see the baked goods there. The other thing about this event was you meet a lot of people from other countries and a lot of Rocketeers from other countries. This woman in the middle was one of Ashley's friends from years and years ago. I remember when she was like, a third of the size she is now as a little child in previous events. And so you get to see the same people over again. And Ashley, and I think her name is Christina, she's from Serbia. They're pretty good friends. They chat via, Instagram and Facebook and all the other social medias. And then our film crew for the Skyward film was also interviewing Christina because of that bond, that international bond. Here's the camera crew just taking a video of her. Ashley's second event was helicopter, and this was on helicopter day. This was our launch pad. This is the Wedgie launch tower. I'm going to do some redesigning on it. And I took this photo because this here on the right side of the tower is the piston launcher holding system that I built for it. And that was new, but it's not going to be needed in the future. But I just wanted to document, hey, I did that in the past. Ashley prepping her helicopter. The film crew, again, followed her everywhere. I think I have a video of one of Ashley's flights and one of the DQs. She DQ'd 2 of her 3 flights. The first one was actually pretty good. It wasn't a max of 3 minutes. It was pretty close. I think it was like 8 seconds off. So it was like 2 minutes and 52 seconds. So it was in that ballpark. It was really close to a max. So she was in pretty good situation. Then her second flight, the nose cone separated completely. And this was because we found out that the ejection charges of the motors were kind of over-pressurizing the rocket and putting a lot of stress on how it was attached on the rocket. And so what we ended up doing was actually removing some of the black powder. But it's always a bad idea to do this in the middle of the competition, because on the third flight and the final flight, with the reduced amount of black powder, now there wasn't enough pressure to even push the nose cone off completely and get the rocket out into where it could start spinning. So it came out partially, but not enough for the blades to deploy. And so the rocket came down horizontally, and since it didn't rotate, she was disqualified.
Place number 7.
So this last picture is Ashley at the airport in Serbia, getting ready to go back to Texas. And then my wife and I, we went off to London. And so this was another, vacation photo of London. And we saw all the typical tourist sites. And this is kind of like afterwards, after we got back home, you know, all the rockets that we took there, this is the condition they arrived back home. We didn't pack them as nice coming home as when we went there. So they got a little bit crunched. But for the most part, they actually, even though they look crunched, they're kind of resilient and they do spring back. And that's it. So that's kind of like the synopsis of what it's like to be on the team, what it's like to travel. And for me, it's kind of like, what can I learn from this? So even though we didn't come home with any medals, I came home with knowledge. And that's far more valuable because the medals, we've got medals before, and those medals are collecting dust. But the knowledge that I come back with, that is going to be so much more valuable in the future than any chunks of metal. So this is the end, and we'll see you next time. May the winds be light, may the skies be blue, and may all your rockets fly straight and true.